said, when I became a man, master, able and noble, then he had to quit believing childish ideas about God. He had to quit praying for somebody to help him. The master has to do it himself. See, his prayers become proclamations, declarations, and decrees. Man, know thyself, and to thine own self be true. That's not biblical. That comes from your ancestral body of cultural knowledge. Man, know thyself, and you will know the gods and the universe.
Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life, that there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. It is this feeling that has brought you to me. You can feel it when you go to work, when you go to church, when you pay your taxes. It is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth. What truth? That you are a slave, Neo. Like everyone else, you were born into bondage, born into a prison that you cannot smell or taste or touch. A prison for your mind.
Now, this story is found in Greece. In the Greek text, they talk the same story. In the Sumerian text, they talk the same story. In the Babylonian text, they talk the same story. In the Kemetic text, they talk the same story. There is no major system that our modern day religions, whatever they are, come from, that don't talk about this same story of this being a subordinate creation. You just have to trace it back to its particular origin.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another segment of the Gnostic Nubian. I'm your host, David Seti, the Gnostic Nubian, and I'm so glad that you have taken some precious time out of your day to tune in, to listen, to vibe what I'm saying. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe to the channel, like the video if you feel inclined, and share it. It's free of charge, and it helps me out a lot. And you can thumbs down the video if you don't agree with what I'm saying. It's all in good faith. Please comment, let me know what you guys are thinking so I can interact with you all more. And let's get right into the topic. Now, this particular topic is near and dear to my heart, especially as a brother that I don't want to say practices, because I kind of hate that word now, but someone that incorporates and lives a Kemetic spiritual outlook on life in my day-to-day life for my personal self. And I was scrolling through my social Facebook news feed, and of course, many of you probably already know who Mr. Imhotep, the posts and things like that this individual posts usually go viral. You see them on Instagram, Facebook, Pinterest, a lot of very interesting things. And this person is a big advocate, as we should be as African people, of preserving the history and preserving the correct historical perspective on all peoples of African descent, no matter what tribe, no matter what culture on the continent you come from. And particularly with the one that you're seeing on the screen right now, we know that in the age of technology, we're able to use these technologies to reconstruct the faces of, well, quote unquote, reconstruct the faces of ancient peoples. And this technology has been used extensively on ancient, quote unquote, ancient Egypt. Because we even have to be very careful about when we're saying ancient, because what's ancient to us is not really ancient to him. And what is ancient to him shouldn't be ancient to us. But that's another story for another day. But actually, no, it ties into what we have to talk about today. So, of course, this has been used to reconstruct the face of King Tut. This has been used to construct the face of Queen Nefertiti. This has been used to construct the face as you see these three random Egyptian boys. And I don't want to say that, because I understand that when it comes to African people, we hold the genetic template for all peoples on the planet. There is not one quote unquote African look that we should be tied down to. But if we're just using modern day way of viewing things, you will notice that when these reconstructions occur, none of them never really looks like African people. They've usually looked like, I hate using the word Middle East, but they tie this Arab type of look to them. And that's really by design. Be very careful about what area of Egypt they find these mummies, what time period in Egyptian history that they are trying to reconstruct these mummies, because they never truly reconstruct pre-dynastic. And trust me, they can find these things. He not over there just digging up these mummies for why spend so much money digging up dead people? What's the benefit of it? I mean, yeah, it gives us, history and things, but imagine if we walked over here and said, well, we want to dig up George Washington, let's dig up Thomas Jefferson, let's dig up your ancestors, and let's reconstruct them in our image and put our narrative on it. But we see that they do that to the African man and woman, specifically the culture of ancient Kemet. Now, when I contemplate this hatred, it's really nothing but hatred. It's very easy for us as conscious people, Black conscious people, to just write it off as the white man's just racist. That's just what he does. He just he wants to put his image on everything. I believe that is a very elementary, still valid, yes, but still an elementary way of looking at why he has such a, no matter how much he tells you now, lift up Black voices and Black Lives Matter, and we stand in solidarity. See, the Black voice that he's trying to lift up is a specific type of Black voice. This Black voice, I guarantee you, has nothing to do with the true upliftment and freedom of Black peoples on this planet. It has everything to do to giving you a false sense of pride in yourself, a false sense of pride in things that don't really mean anything and this is just my opinion, that don't really mean anything at the end of the day. Because if it still keeps you locked in his day-to-day matrix, if it still keeps you locked in his day-to-day reality, then I don't care what Black person you put to represent me. I don't care what Black voice you lift up. If it's not about the total eradication of this evil, oppressive system on this planet, and the freedom, not just for my people, but for all of the earth's children, then I don't care about what voice you lifting up. Because usually the voice has something to do very specific within time. Because we got to understand, the way we are right now, if human beings were to go into the future, hopefully, the topics and things like that interest us, that holds our attention, that we have to hold on to, and it gives us some sort of definition of ourselves in the reality in which they probably won't even, we would go to ancient days and look at our ancestors, and our ancestors will probably look at us like, wow, y'all are very dumb. You understand? I say that in love. I truly do. And because I love my people so much, I have such a BS radar when I see my people falling for things. I don't mean to get too off topic, but I see our people falling for things that has nothing to do. These are just distractions. These are just to keep you away from the true reality. So listen, we can tie this into the topic then. While he's over there digging up the bodies of your ancestors, trying to learn their secrets, he has you over here arguing and debating over frivolous shit, stuff that does not matter, has never mattered. Yes, it may matter in a sense of our little culture, but culture changes. Times change. The early 2000s, many of us look back and it's considered ancient history at this point. But the powers that be understand this and they know this. So when it comes down to this hatred, and it's not just from the quote unquote white man. I mean, I've seen comments from people. I mean, it just is. If you say the ancient Egyptians, I mean, I know y'all seen it. The ancient Egyptians weren't black. They weren't Negroid. It's just like this indignation that comes out of them when you even reference the fact, well, no, the ancient Egyptians were a black people. They were an African people. It's like, oh my God, like, what did I say? Now, keep this in mind, because even I had to get hip. The spirit hips me to some stuff when it comes to an African look. I remember a long time ago, it's been a long time at this point, when before Marvel Studios did Black Panther, made the movie Black Panther. And I remember being so upset, me being a comic nerd and I love movies and stuff. And I even thought about doing a second channel talking about movie news and things like that to kind of, separate things and all that. But I remember being so upset. So then when Marvel announced that they were doing a Black Panther thing, I wasn't really happy, because I knew, okay, what you about to do? So then when it comes out, and I don't get me wrong, I understand what that movie meant to my, my people. I understand what it meant to the black actors and actresses that played in the movie, and how it was a cultural phenomenon, Wakanda forever, all that. I completely understand all that. Don't get me wrong. I'm not that negative and that cynical in that matter. But no, I completely understand all that. But it really kind of got me hip to, okay, there is a certain aspect of African culture that's passable, that you are allowed to partake in. But then there's another aspect of African culture that when you speak on it being the product of Africa, then something's wrong. And we see that with Kemet. If you're able to make a Wakanda and to put all this African black greatness, why then are you still casting white people? And now you notice today, they try to stem away. So you get Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, Oscar Isaacs, these people that are actually not from the continent themselves, or from other parts of the world. They are kind of given that template, that look for what Egypt has to pass off now, because he knows that he just can't put a blonde haired, blue-eyed man and woman on the screen anymore. People are you testing people's intelligence at that point. But what he does like to do now is very slick. He technically puts people of color on the screen now when it comes to portraying ancient Egyptians. But there's a certain type of person of color that's why I believe the introduction of that term, which it's been around forever, but how it's been used a lot lately, people of color, I believe that can hold a lot of positive things in it, but can also hold a lot of negative, sly things. And remember, your enemy is very sneaky. That's how his power runs. He's sneaky with it. He doesn't do anything anymore outright in your face. He understood that. And as any leader that's running this world, you will be wise to understand that the things that you did in the past don't really work in this current generation. So the things that my ancestors did, as far as not my personal ancestors, but let's just say his, as far as just outright burning civilizations down, kidnapping people, well, they might not fly in today's world. So we have to shift it to the mind. Focus on the mind. Because I can put chains on you physically all day long. That doesn't make you a slave. It doesn't make you ignorant. It's when I get in your mind, that's when I have you. That's when you're my slave. So I do believe that, yes, the hatred for an African Kemet, the hatred for, notice they don't touch southern Kemet in Nubia and what is modern day Sudan, because they know that, okay, that may be a little bit preposterous, but he does it even sneakily with, yeah, we know that we had conflicts with the Nubians and the the Kemites, and it's even when it comes to conflicts, yes, historically they did. The two neighboring brothers and sisters we had our conflicts with each other. To me, it's no difference than Crips and Bloods not liking each other. You have your territory, I have my territory. We do what we do, but you clearly can see that the culture of Kemet is coming out of the South. That Nubia, Kush, whatever you want to call it, was clearly the mother's foundation, the foundation for northern Egypt. And he even says that. He puts that in his books. That's not something that's hidden. That's not something that he denies. Now, someone will deny it. Someone will. Be very careful. Someone will try to deny that fact. But then if you're telling me that A, humanity started in Africa, B, ancient Egyptian culture originated in the south of what we know today as Sudan, South Africa, Nubia, then why do you still have such this hatred towards putting Black people in their place in the scene of world history in Kemetic culture? Now, one of the reasons I think that there's such a hatred for giving Kemet its African origin, its African everything, is because of this. I'm a very big, and if you know me, and if you listen to my videos, you know that I'm very big on trying to get into people's heads that the world in which you live in is in reality very fake. When I say fake, I don't mean it, the world's an illusion, nothing is real. No, that's not what I'm saying. It's this. The powers that be, the brotherhoods and the secret societies and stuff that run this world. How is it so hard for people to really accept that when we go around AKA this and Alpha Phi this, and if y'all are willing to accept that that's a type of brotherhood and sisterhood, why is it so far-fetched to believe that there could be fraternities, dark fraternities and dark sororities on this planet that run y'all life? So that's why I mean that it's pretty much fake. And that these people, notice even then, even when you get into Greek fraternities, we're calling it Greek fraternities, but you don't use Greek symbolism. Maybe the letters, yeah. But all the other symbolism is Egyptian, Kemetic. Ponder that for a second. The Kemites said that the Greeks are nothing but children, will always be children. The language that they speak, it can't really capture the spirituality that the Medunetter can. And mind you, they even say that all the Greek gods were nothing but Kemetic gods given Greek names, and in turn the Romans just adopted Greek gods and gave them Roman names. Now, I don't necessarily see anything wrong with it, in the sense that that's just how the ancient world worked. When I was debating Israelites in my hometown, I was really trying to get my brothers and sisters that subscribe to an Israelite paradigm, and I have really nothing against them because I understand the mindset that they're coming from. I understand, but they off on certain things. See, I was trying to come and get them to see that, listen, yeah, it's cool in the conscious community to say that, well, the Israelites stole something from Kemet. And I wasn't really trying to vibe with it. I was trying to get them to understand that, no, the Israelites were influenced. That's completely different than stole something. They were influenced by the ancient Kemetic civilization, the Babylonians, the Samaritans, they were influenced by these people. And that what makes up your religion today. Elements are taken from these civilizations that they were so-called enslaved to. And that's why I can look in your Bible and say, that's Kemetic or this. See, it really shouldn't be. I really shouldn't have to go to your religion. And I don't mean to rant on this, but trust me, y'all, it's going to make sense. I really shouldn't have to go to your religion and can see something you claim to be infallible, you claim to be the word of God, you claim it to be above everything else on this planet. It can say to you, well, that's actually taken from the Medu Neter, and I can go to this temple wall that's still standing to this day and show you that's where they were influenced by. Black people in America. African American culture, for example, is very unique to the American continent. North American continent. Black people in North America, as we were enslaved in North America, and pretty much still enslaved, but our culture is very different than our native brothers and sisters on the continent. Yeah, we still are a product. Both of us are Africa's children, but by us being slaves here in America, we still retain that, I guess, Africanness in us, if that's even a word. Well, Africanness in us, but we have been influenced by the dominant culture around us. And then you see it in videos. I mean, y'all seen them, the difference between Africans and African Americans. Why can't Africans get along with African Americans? To me, it's all bullshit, because even then you have to understand that, I mean, while many of us on this continent are trying to get back to Africa, and we know that the Africa that exists today is not the Africa that our ancestors existed in. Let's make that clear. And I'm not really into all that romanticizing, trying to look at the Africa that our ancestors looked in as a paradise. No, we know that was not it. Now, compared to this shit that we dealing with over here, then yeah, it was a paradise, and that should say something. But I'm not really into trying to pit the African on the continent against the African American over here, because we are the same thing. We've just been influenced by the environment around us and the dominant power that has existed. So even if we take the ancient Israelites, if y'all are saying that they were slaves in Egypt for almost 400 years or 300, depending on the interpretation, why wouldn't it make sense that these people were influenced by if you're saying that they built the pyramids, built all these temples, did they also chisel in the walls the Medu Neter? And if they did they understand what they were chiseling? If they did, see, those are the questions that people don't like to answer, because then it really has to make you question, well, then what the hell are we really believing in? So if the Israelites literally were slaves, built those temples, chiseled the Medu Neter into those stones with such precision, but then you leave Kemet and then go to Israel or, Canaan, and you don't retain any of that, you don't keep any of that. When you do, because we can see the influence in the religion, but there's no more temples, there's no more grandness that we see that y'all so-called built in Kemet. And this is not an Israelite bad session. I'm just trying to get us to understand certain things. So this isn't to bash the Israelites or bash those who, because there's a lot of very deep occult knowledge that you can take from the Old Testament, the Israelite religion. A lot of their history, I feel, they have yet to tap into, because they are in a parameter, they're structuring their mindset in a parameter that is pretty much a modern day Christian, just without calling themselves a modern day Christian. But that's another story for another day. What I'm trying to get us to understand is this, that we have to be when they say, so there's a difference between an African American and an African, or a black person. Black is a very defined type of black person, because we have to think to ourselves is this: if the Indian from India, so a man or a woman that has come from India, many of them can be darker than any African American you ever will come across, yet they are not called black people when they come over here. what I'm trying to get us to understand is that when you say to them, not the scholars and the archaeologists, they know better, but I'm talking about the common people that seem to have such a hatred and indignation against calling the ancient Kemetic peoples black people, because black is something that is a concept of the African American man and woman in the hills of North America, period. That is why you can say Jesus was a man of color, but you can't say he was a black man. You can say the Egyptians were people of color, but you can't say that they were black people. The way that the black man and the black woman in America has been so defamed, has been so brought down, so low. The image has been twisted and made into something that is not in its natural order and what it really should be and has the potential to be. It carries with it a negative connotation. And that's why I tell people we have to be very careful about the images we put out about ourselves on the world stage. One of the things, the criticisms like with Tyler Perry and stuff like that, see, is we understand who we are. We know who we are. We know that those things don't always reflect us as a group of people. The thug life type stuff when it comes to black men, that's a very small percentage of black men in America. But it would appear that black men are that way because that's the narrative that's given in the mainstream media. That's how black people are. So then around the world, when they see these images broadcast by this demonic entertainment industry, then it would appear that when you say that these are black people, well, then the Egyptians could have been black people. Jesus wasn't a black man. You see what I'm saying? But you can say that he was a person of color. You can say that those were people of color. I mean, hell, if you really want to be honest with yourself, there are certain Europeans that you can label technically people of color. I personally never even understood about the concept of Rome and how we see in these movies and in these entertainment things of, Rome being like this British white person. But then if Rome is in Italy, so then that would technically make them Italians. Why is it that we get the template of the British white man, the British European, as the Romans, the Roman emperors? Maybe in a later date, that's what they became. But I think it's very fascinating. Even when you look at images of ancient Roman people, they don't look like the British European. So it's very fascinating stuff. And I'm not trying to spin this on no racist thing or no one race or group of people is better than the other. I just think that it's very fascinating when we get into this idea of why is there such this hatred for ancient Kemet, for ancient Kemet being a black civilization. So let's get on this part. When people say to you that there were white people in ancient Egypt, you look at them and you tell them, you're right. There were white people. Well, what we think of as white people today. There were white people in ancient Egypt. Notice that these scholars only want to talk about the quote-unquote late period. They only want to talk about the time of the Ptolemies, when Alexander the Great had conquered Europe. The disconnect that we are having when it comes to this indignation and hatred for Kemet is because the European man is only truly, really interacting with Kemet of the past. Well, not even Kemet of the past. He's interacting with the Egypt of the past when he can find his face amongst us in Kemet. Very little is published and talked about when it comes to primordial Kemet, pre-dynastic Kemet. Because see, then they would have to understand that they would know that we can't put our face there. So they always have to do late period things. They have to do when Kemet came into contact with the Greeks and came in contact with the Romans and came in a lot of contact with people from the Near East. So we get, Canaan and Arabia and all those sorts of things. but he can't talk about a pre-dynastic ancient Kemet because a pre-dynastic ancient Kemet renders it renders it African point blank, period. So the mummies that he dig up, the things that he finds, that he feels comfortable putting out in the public, even if he's reconstructing the faces of these people and say that these were ancient Egyptians, we have to understand, well, but see, the public don't do that. They won't do that. Most people don't sit and research and do all those other things. They don't ask no questions. They just, oh, those were ancient Egyptians. Oh, that's Queen Nefertiti. That type of thing. But what period of Kemetic history are you finding? Because see, the Kemetic history that my people are trying to get back in contact with, or trying to have an understanding, the thing that's in our soul that we feel connected to, that Kemet had been failed. Egypt maybe had been on the rise, but Kemet, this was gone. I mean, I even have books on our philosophers and our prophets that mourned and saw and wept at the decay of Kemetic civilization. So the Kemet in the black man and woman's mind that he and she feel so connected to is not the Egypt that he is given to us. So yes, Egypt could have been was a mixed group of people. You could probably find some white, quote unquote, white people in it. But that Kemet, with that phase of Egyptian history, although we have gained a lot of knowledge about the ancient Kemetic people at that time, you really have to go into certain books that you don't really think to go into. One of them I really love is the Hermetica. And even when you read about how the indigenous African indigenous people of Kemet despised Alexandria, wanted it gone. There were prophecies of them trying to prophesy the fall, the great library of Alexandria and stuff. They didn't want that. Now we can look at that and think that was a great time in ancient civilization. But even if you really kind of study how our ancient, and you see it because you see how black people are and African people are today, very sticklers for tradition. My people here in America, black people in America, when you get into the tradition of Christianity, try to challenge that and see what you're met with. Because that has been the tradition of my people in America. At its core, it is African, but it's very heavily veiled amongst a lot of Christian iconography, Christian symbolism, Christian mindset. Challenge it if you want to. And you see the plight of a lot of black people that are trying to wake up their friends and families that are in the church is very hard. One of the things that these archaeologists, so to speak, these historians, if that's what you want to call them, they bet on the ignorance of the masses of people. Part of the South Atlantic Sea at one point was called the Ethiopian Ocean, the Ethiopian Sea, but that's on the west of Africa. There was one point where Africa itself was called Ethiopia. When you see things in text where the ancient Kemetic ancestors may have said that someone came from a king or a conqueror came from Libya, we have to understand that the Africa that is existing today is not the Africa of our ancestors, like I said before. Libya at one point was considered anything west of the Nile River. The Africa that you see of Libya, Sudan, Nigeria, Kenya, South Africa, Morocco, we have to understand that that's not the Africa that our ancient ancestors lived in. Those weren't concepts and borders that they existed in. But see, he bets on your ignorance. He bets on you reading these texts and thinking to yourself, well, in my modern day mind, Libya is a country. And then when you go in, type in, go go on Google and type in Libyan people. Now, I'm not saying that these people are not. No, that's not what I'm saying. But what I'm trying to get us to understand is, because they bet on the ignorance of the masses of people in the public, that's how this white supremacist view of ancient Kemet can stand. Because we are not looking at our motherland through our ancestors' eyes. We are looking at the motherland through a modern day colonial, broken up, Europeanized way, and thinking that that has been the Africa that our ancestors existed in, and it's not. So that's a way that he can kind of keep this white idea of ancient Kemet, of ancient Egypt, that even his European ancestors would have been calling these people by certain things. Herodotus, one of their proud historians of Greek origin, said the ancient Kemetic people had woolly hair and had thick lips and dark skin. Out of his own mouth, I guess, quote unquote, he said that. But you still see a hatred. No. That wasn't a black man. Because like I told y'all, a black man means something specific in the psychology of people today. When my ancestors, we wasn't calling ourselves black people, African. There wasn't even a name for us. Until we get back to our original indigenous ancestral language and ways of calling ourselves who we are, that he can always go around with this fabrication of ancient Egypt being a white civilization, or it's influenced by Europeans, or influenced by anything other than Africa herself. There's a really good channel, and I'm I will put it in the comments. Brother on the continent is doing a lot of great work. And even he was talking to one of the elders, and he said that one of the things that they did was they had to go in and even go into Kemet and change the names from a name that if you heard it, you would think, oh, that's an African name, and have to give it more of a Greek thing to it. So even we see that Egypt is nothing but the Greek rendering, where our people did not call it Egypt. Our people did not call our kings and queens pharaohs. I know that that's just the language and it's good, templates just to kind of use to get people to understand where we're coming from. But we have to be very clear that that's not what they call the Egyptian gods. When even Neter, like the Medu Neter or the Neteru, that's not translated as gods. Even he knows that that's not really the only thing that we can give it equivalent in the English language is gods. But that's what you have to give it the equivalent as. That may not have been what my ancestors said that understood that concept to be, a god. And because we see how the Greek interacted with his quote-unquote gods, we in turn think that the indigenous people on the continent of Africa, in Kemet, in Nubia, interacted with their quote-unquote gods the same way, or even understood them to be these energies, to even be a quote-unquote god. So then you see the arguments of, well, monotheism has always existed in ancient Egypt and things like that. Well, if monotheism always existed in ancient Egypt, but I'm seeing all these statues and all these offerings and all these texts to these other entities and energies, then clearly Neter or Neteru doesn't translate as gods. But that's another story for another day. Now, I'm of the school of thought where I'm not into the belief that the Neter or the Neteru were simply just archetypes of the human mind. No, I believe that the deeper you get into the science of it, you can equate them with archetypes of the human mind. But people don't give offerings and prayers, things like that, to archetypes that purely exist mentally. we have to understand that our people did look at these energies as very external to themselves, that had influence outside themselves. Yes, the deeper we get into the occult aspect of it, we can bring it back to a center of self and say that these really just represent, of course, the priests and the priestesses, they understood things differently than what the common people understood or what they were given and how they operated off of it. Really good book I was reading. I forgot what it was called. I'm gonna have to find it for y'all. But it even kind of begged the question of, was the common people's idea of the gods anything even remote of what we are getting from the temple text and all those sorts of things? Remember, because not all of us were illiterate in ancient days. Literacy and being able to read and things, that's not something like we think of it today. Like I said, we have to be careful of putting our modern day minds on ancient peoples, because most of us can read, but that wasn't always the case at one point on this planet. Reading was for the elite. It's just like, say, let's put it in this way. Imagine if you, your parents, your children, your husband, your wife, your boyfriend, girlfriend, imagine if y'all couldn't read, but only celebrities could. Imagine that if the majority of us that work our regular 9 to 5s and just going out there and working just to make it and just to put food on our table, imagine if you couldn't read, but your manager was the one, or your boss was the one that was the only literate one at the job. It's just something to think about. So he bets on the ignorance of the masses of people that really don't research and really don't read, don't really care for it, or just simply too busy trying to feed their children and feed their families and stuff. So when they get a little relaxation and it's whatever, the thing that's broadcast to them on the History Channel, quote unquote History Channel, or National Geographic, you see these images that we've reconstructed the faces of ancient Egyptians, and you get a face that does not look African. Be very careful about this. One of the other reasons I feel that there's such an indignant hatred for an ancient African Kemetic view in origin is because the powers that be that run this world, Kemetic philosophy, Kemetic imagery, he even says that all the stuff comes from ancient Kemet, not ancient Egypt. Let's keep that clear. Ancient Kemet. To this day, you ever wonder why they find these graves of people in Kemet and they're usually in a fetal position, but the quote unquote pharaohs, the elite, people that could afford a sarcophagus, a coffin, they're buried in the Osirian position with the hands across the chest? That's because there's an aspect of ancient Kemet that's very rarely talked about. Now, you can get research on it, yeah, but it's not given to the mainstream. Because when you think of ancient Egypt, they want you to have it in your mind of the ancient Egypt where the Greeks were around. The Romans were around. The ancient pharaohs and kings were fighting Asiatics or Aryans or whatever you want to call them. Because ancient Kemet runs his reality. He in turns takes the symbolisms that's benefiting him profoundly, takes those images, twists them, regurgitates it, and then feeds it to you. And because you are existing under a Judeo-Christian mindset, automatically writes this stuff off as evil, automatically writes this stuff off as satanic, automatically writes this stuff off as the Illuminati, and never ever think to go within and take those symbols and say, no, the Eye of Horus, that's not an Illuminati satanic symbol. That was a symbol used by my ancestors for the highest good. That was the symbol used. A symbol alone can give you so much wisdom than 50 million books could ever give you about this universe. You need your telescopes and your spacecraft and all those type of things to study the stars. But my ancestors put down one glyph in Medu Neter that could explain all that shit, and you don't even know about it. And have yet to decipher what did they really mean by that. Like the meme says, you can tell me what Jesus said and did. Literally, the Son of God. You can tell me what he said and did in your book. But you can't even tell me how the pyramids were built. You're still speculating on what age the Sphinx was made in. But you can literally tell me what the Son of God said and did on this planet. Something to think about. Another reason why I believe that there's such a hatred for the idea of not really an idea, but the acceptance of an African origin of Kemet is because of this. Even though Kemet had its problems, we were human. I mean, like I said, I can read y'all books and things like that of our ancestors. You can look it up, research it for yourself. Of where, they pretty much said that, this just pretty much, think of a modern day America. Let's take of the height of ancient Kemetic civilization, the pyramids, the priesthood. I mean, all this stuff that we just feel in us is like, wow, just a wonder. And then something happens in history where Kemet pretty much becomes modern day America. And these people, these learned people, are mourning the decline of their civilization. The newer generations, they don't get it. They're falling behind. They're, I guess in modern Christian terms, they're just embracing sin and evil. And this was a reality at one point. The king, we have these corrupt kings that were pharaohs, for lack of a better word. These corrupt pharaohs that were not chosen by divine providence and by prophecy and by divination. They were just put in just for being the strongest muscle on the street. The traditions and the offerings and the all that has been abandoned. Kemet has fallen. You notice you never really see them marveling at the pyramids and the things, all types of stuff in their texts. They're mourning the moral decline, the spiritual decline of the people. And by the time that had happened, then you can get an invading force like the Greeks. You can get an invading force like the Romans. You can get an invading force like the Persians. You can get an invasion force like the Assyrians and all these people that invaded us. Because if you were to take modern day America as black people, then it would make sense why they were so easily able to come in. Because African people at our core, once our spirituality and our morals decline, you pretty much got us. And it won't be a military weapon in the world that can stop the invading force. When he came to the shores of West Africa, before he enslaved us, he didn't come in guns blazing. He came with his missionaries. He came with goodwill. He came as a religious man. And because my people are so spiritual and are willing to just accept you just based off you being human alone, we accept you. We allow you to come in. We'll teach you some things. You're inquiring about something, we'll teach you what the priesthood did with the Greeks. We'll give you a little bit of knowledge. We ain't gonna tell you everything, of course, but we'll show you around the temples, and I mean, we see it today with when people come in to certain parts of Africa inquiring about certain things, and because my people are so innocent and such a childlike people, we're duped easily. And I know I might be canceled for that, but I mean, hey, it is what it is. We are. It's no fault of our own, and to a certain extent, But like I said before, you are meant to look at your ancestors, see what happened to them, and gain wisdom from it, so it doesn't happen to you. Because evil, at its core, never really changes. The only thing, so the outcome never really changes. You end up a slave. What morphs is simply what culture that this evil is taking over. So a lot of black people are leaving the Christian church today. So evil won't masquerade anymore as the big bad Jesus. It can't get you like that no more. It's gonna get you another way. And I personally, for myself, I see how it's getting us. But I try not to speak on it because I realize that to a certain extent, there are certain aspects of it that could wake people up. But I know how the enemy works. And I know that I see what you're doing. And I see that, like you said, the wisdom. I see that you're using something like my ancestors that we perceive to just be so pure and so good. But in reality, it's about to be flipped and morphed and changed into something you don't even recognize. And it's going to contribute to your modern day slavery. The hatred for ancient Kemet being black stems from the fact of, well, this idea that we're all one, we're all humanity, we all share the same thing. The way, and I'm going to use this in parentheses, the way the white man works is this. He gives you this thing where he only sees the material. So in most of Africa, you get, in his mind, mud huts, nothing of significance, maybe some beautiful sculptures every now and then, and some cute little stories. But in his mind, Kemet represents the grandness of ancient civilization simply because of what our ancient Kemetic ancestors did physically. So the temples, the pyramids, the statues, all that. That's what gravitates him towards that. He doesn't really see any benefit of going, to a certain extent, he doesn't, into certain parts of Africa where these are just, people living in the jungle. There's nothing here. There's nothing that I can learn from. There's nothing that I can see written on a wall and translate. And even if I don't have the proper meaning and translation of it, I'm still able to translate it. So the African in the mud hut, the African in the desert, the African, the nomad, they don't hold any real spiritual significance or anything. They don't hold any real knowledge of anything. So he writes them off as those, primitive, those people couldn't have possibly attributed anything to the grandness that I see in front of my eyes in Kemet. You literally have the ancient Kemetic people telling you our origins start at the mountain of the moon, which is pretty much what people have come to know as Mount Kilimanjaro, which is in the interior of Africa, pretty much. It's clearly African. Do you see any other indigenous groups of people on this planet saying, we come from Mount Kilimanjaro? You literally have the ancient Kemetic people telling us, we come from in the interior of Africa, and yet it's so hard for you to accept a black Kemet, an African Kemet. I think the hatred for a black African origin of Kemet is coming from something deeper than just people being racist or just people just not liking black people. Like I said, for me personally, that's an elementary way of looking at it. It comes from something so deep that if black people ever truly realized that the hatred for you, not really you, the hatred for your origin where you come from, what you began as, if he can distort that in so many ways that you will never even go back to even look at where your ancestors came from, then you would pretty much contribute to the downfall of the human species and contribute to the downfall of the planet as a whole. So when I get my people, images are everything. And the hatred for a black kemet, to a certain extent, boils down to imagery. As a black man living in America, when I see my young fellow black men wanting to identify with people that want to identify with figures, other black men that they put up, the media props up as the thing to be. If you don't see yourself as anything greater than what he puts in front of your face, then the world is always going to be this. Remember, you were so-called the kings and the rulers of civilization at one point. If I look at a temple wall and see my image, a pharaoh, for lack of a better word, upholding my odds. But no, that's not a black man. A pharaoh is not a black man. Notice that's why they have to do the whole that shit with the black pharaohs when they talk about the Nubian pharaohs, because they have to make a difference between the two. They have to really kind of reinforce this I mean, the way they spin it, Nubia in Egypt, so to speak, had so much conflict with each other that it was just never a time of peace between each other. There was just never time. They always have to reinforce that Nubian Egyptian conflict, because he knows that he can't go into Nubia and put his face on anything in Nubia. He has to focus on northern Kemet, which is at the border of the Mediterranean Sea, where yes, it would have been a gateway, a bridge to other civilizations and other groups of people coming from certain parts of Europe, coming from certain parts of Asia. So he really kind of has to reinforce always that the Nubians and the Egyptians just never got along. They always were in conflict with each other. They were always at war with each other. See, he has the Nubians as prisoners in war and slaves and the chains. Those weren't black people. But to me, knowing what I know in my soul, that those type of conflicts can really be written off as the same thing that you see between gang members, Crips and Bloods. The same people, both black, both African descent, having conflicts and scrimmages off. I mean, me, when I'm looking at the history and reading the history, to me comes off as, well, that's kind of petty. Y'all could have felt it. But I mean, hey, I wasn't there. You know what I'm saying? I don't know the height between the two or whatever like that, but you always see that it's always the quote unquote Nubian pharaohs that have such a strong position with trying to rescue their cousins up north from the hands of foreign people and to reestablish the traditions of their ancestors. So no matter what my people, I can disagree with my people all day long. There's a lot of things right now that's happening in our culture I fundamentally disagree with my people on, that where it appears as like the masses are just accepting, but they're still my people. And at the end of the day, I'm still going to cape for them. And I'm still going to be behind their back. Whatever I have against my people, that's for me, for us, amongst us to talk about, for us to reconcile amongst ourselves. We don't need a third party. And again, like I said, it goes to the wisdom of learning from what happened with our ancestors. But he cleverly does that, pitting the Nubian against the quote unquote Egyptian. because by him doing that, he can further have this greater gap between Egypt being in Africa. There's no body of water separating Egypt from Nubia. Actually, is if we want to be real, there's no body of water separating a lot of these quote unquote countries in Africa. It may be a little river or a little lake, but nothing of significance. That's just like me looking at, I'm from St. Louis. They're just like me looking at the Mississippi River separating St. Louis from Illinois and thinking that Illinois, the people in Illinois are something different than what I am in St. Louis, in Missouri. Nonsense. But he bets on you thinking that way because it can reinforce his hatred for a black Kemet. So let me know what you guys are thinking. I don't want to keep going on. I mean, we can go on and on for hours about this, but you know, I don't want to make this a long 2 or 3 hour video. I may go back and touch on this in later videos and things like that. But just for this right now, I kind of wanted to give you all like a perspective of why there is such a hatred for. One of the things I want you guys to take away from this is this: black means something to you, yes, but it means something totally different to the rest of the world. So when you say that the ancient Kemetic people were black people, in quotes, remember that instills something in the psyche of other groups of people. So that's why you can have people that don't study shit, they ain't never read no book about no ancient Egyptian history. But all you have to say is the Egyptians were black. The Egyptians weren't black people. You have people that don't believe in no Jesus at all. Say Jesus was black. Jesus wasn't a black man. Because black means something in their psyche. Another key difference I want you guys to take away, the hatred for an African origin of Kemet, is this: that he has to literally acknowledge that, well, all my philosophy, all of my gods, all of it has an African origin. That there was never really anything original, so to speak, that my people have. It was all influenced. Like I said, there's nothing wrong with being influenced. There's nothing wrong with that. It was influenced by Negroids. Negroid people. Another thing I want you guys to take away from this is that my people, being very spiritual from the beginning, our downfall is this: that we like people to come in. We'll take people in. You're human. We'll show you around. We'll show y'all around the temples. We'll let y'all decipher a little bit of Metal Nectar. We'll give y'all some of the mysteries and things like that. And then, unfortunately, these people take it, they run with it, they twist it, and they'll bring it back in for your enslavement. And here you are just thinking, well, I'm just trying to teach humanity. I'm just trying to love humanity. But he has a different agenda. And when I mean he, I'm talking about an overruling power. I'm not talking about the common motherfucker that's walking around the street. And then another key difference for the hatred, of course, is there's just a lot of anti-blackness going around. A lot of like I said, when they talk about this whole let's stick with black people, Black Lives Matter, lift up black voices and stuff, there's a specific type of black person. They know. You thinking they talking about all y'all. No. It's a very specific type of black person. And trust me, none of that has anything to do with the liberation and total freedom of your people on the face of this planet, not just America. I know sometimes as Americans, we think that America is the earth. It's not. And we need to understand that. And I say all of this in love and for the ultimate freedom of the human species. So, from now on, Egypt is white. Egypt is a mixed civilization. Egypt is indigenous, Greek, quote unquote, Middle Eastern. But Kemet is African. Kemet is the faces of my ancestors. Kemet is where we came down to put down our knowledge. Kemet is fundamentally and will always be an African civilization. So let them have Egypt. Let them have what they claim is Egypt. Let them reconstruct mummies from the late period, when you have the Assyrians, the Persians, the Greeks, the Romans, when Kemet had been failed. Let him have Egypt when the knowledge was forever gone. But for us, those of you who know, those of you who are black and you feel it in your bones, you feel it in your spirit, it's something that you can't put a finger on, because everything around you is telling you that Egyptians, the Kemetic people, weren't black, but you feel your ancestors calling out to you. You feel it when you see the temple walls and something says to you deep down inside, that's you. You can't put a finger on it. Sometimes you're kind of hesitant to reach out and touch it because the world is telling you that you will be believing in a lie. No. Listen, black man and black woman. Listen to your mother. Because one thing about a mother, she will seek out her children at all costs. If her child is missing, she will do whatever she has to do in her power to seek out that child. So don't be dismayed at this man and his attempts to whitewash your ancestral ways, whitewash the people you come from. Don't allow him in his cleverness to paint something that we have no problem accepting as history to be the history of the beginning. Don't allow what you see on the news is what they paint Egyptians today, modern day. There's a reason why they say modern day Egyptians, to deter you from the fact that that's not my people's land anymore. I mean, even the Dogon say, we were priests in Kemet. We left when times got rough and we had to leave. Really good book written by a modern day Egyptian. His name is Moustafa Gadalla, called Exiled Egyptians. And this man literally goes into, now in our intents and purposes, he's considered an Arab, a modern day Egyptian. You know how they like to classify human beings. That's what he would be looked at as. And even he writes this book and says that, listen, the ancient Egyptians ain't in Egypt no more. There are certain parts of ancient Egypt that still exist in the lower parts of, Egypt, Sudan, and things like that. But a lot of them went west. So then you get the Dogon saying, we were in Egypt, we're in Kemet, we left and went west because of the persecution that was happening. But when he looks at the Dogon, he is fascinated by the fact that they know that there's a star around the Sirius star system, but they don't have telescopes to see that. He's fascinated by something like that. And even when they tell him we were Kemetic priests, weren't not these same priests able that you look at in ancient Egypt that was able to so-called chart the stars and have all this knowledge of the equinoxes and all this shit that they know, that they believe in, that they whole occult system runs off of, was given to them by Africans. Period. This has nothing to do with black supremacy, whatever, how they always, I hate that black supremacy. As if black people are literally walking around this planet thinking that we really are supreme to anybody. Now, yeah, you may have some people, but if black people really walked around here believing that we were supreme than all of y'all, then y'all got another thing coming. I'm just gonna let y'all know that right now. The fact that America even exists today is because we lowered ourselves down to a level we had no business being in. And even when the opportunity was given to us to raise ourselves up, my people still decided to humble themselves, thinking that your way of life was the end all be all. I don't want to go on a rant. Let me not get started, y'all. So the same way these historians tried to pit the Nubian against the so-called Egyptian is the same way he likes to pit the African American against the so-called African. And the truth and the reality is this: there's nothing new under the sun. We are all children of Africa, period. And we all, whether you are on the continent or whether you are in the hells of North America, you are still taking from a mother who is the primordial source of us all. And you may have went your separate ways like children do. Some grow up to be doctors. Some grow up to be the black sheep of the family. But you still have one mother. Contemplate that. Really, truly contemplate on what that means. Because like I said, I think the biggest thing he likes to do is pit the Nubian against the so-called Egyptian. And because these people had conflicts with each other at one point, then there's somehow two different people. And yet it is the Nubian who was always coming to bat for his cousins in the north to uphold Ma'at, to go back to the ways of our ancestors. For you Israelites, they like to use the fact that there was a Israelite king that contacted a Kemetic pharaoh king. That Kemetic pharaoh that he contacted was Nubian. Well, at least how they classified the pharaohs, was a Nubian pharaoh, and came to help you Israelites out. So you Israelites that's always trying to debate the so-called Kemetic community, remember, we were the ones that helped you against the foreign Asiatics that was trying to take away your, if we just putting this in that sort of context. But see, that all goes down into narratives. If indigenous people are not looking at ourselves, that we know deep down in our heart how we are, no matter how they try to make the history seem probably more fiery than what it really was, it's cousins, people, indigenous people looking after each other. Keep this in mind, because there's a whole history, there's a whole study about how the Israelites were really nothing but Ethiopians. And if we put it in that context, Ethiopians that existed within Kemetic culture and in Nubian culture and went their own way. So then, of course, you get into political aspects and, well, there was probably something in Israel or in Canaan that, the pharaohs and stuff like that probably, had. And so it was mutually looking out for our own best interests to help the Israelites fight a foreign invasion. I get all that. But I want people to understand this. The way that they pit the African American against the African on the continent is the same way they like to pit this thing about and this is just coming from my spirit. It's the same way they like to pit the quote unquote Egyptian from the Nubian, and not really realizing that since we aren't given our narrative as African people on the conflicts of these people, then he can spin it and put it as a way of these people had conflicts with each other because they were somehow different than each other. Be very careful, because this man is in the game of rewriting history. Because if you don't learn from your ancestors' mistakes, if you don't learn from what your ancestors did, you're going to continue and always to continue to repeat the cycle of oppression on this planet. Let me repeat that again. And I hate to get this type of stuff, just makes me upset, y'all. Until we, as African people, learn and have the wisdom from our ancestors and what they did and how they went about doing things, until we take the wisdom from it and say, this applies to us, this does not. We see what they did right there, but that's not how we need to go forward in this. You're going to continue to repeat the cycle. He has y'all down right now, tearing down statues of the Confederacy, tearing down this and rewriting this. Be careful, because are you doing it because you really care about the history? Or is he doing it because he has an agenda to rewrite history and he needs you to be the pawn in the game to help him rewrite how he has been viewed and his actions on this planet? See, our ancestors would chisel out people's names on the walls if they didn't agree with them. Our people would tear down the statues in the idols of, well, I won't say idols, but the statues of pharaohs. There's a reason why Akhenaten in his history is still very vague, because our black ancestors said, you messing with tradition, you messing with our way of life, you're messing, we need to make sure we eradicate your name from existence. Now, to our ancestors, I do understand that they had a spiritual reason why they were doing that. But at the same time, too, I don't think that was a right way of doing things. No, leave it. Let the generations coming forward see what this man did. Let's make him an example. And I'm not saying that that's not what they did, but I'm saying that it has an effect on us as their descendants. Because now we're trying to put pieces and puzzles together, because our ancestors had this idea that if we can just erase his name, and we are looking at it like, no, give us his name. Let us see what this ancestor did. Let us see and try to understand that and have a complete, holistic view of history. So that's why I don't advocate the taking down of certain statues. Yes, I do see the spiritual significance of it, but no, I want to take my kids, and y'all see that man right there? He did this and he did that. But because the powers that run this world understand and bow down to your black ancestors and saw what they did and see how it benefits him, you're going to forever be in this system of Black Lives Matter, oppression, tear this down, burn this up, burn this book. Don't do that because, no, you don't get it. And it ties all into, if we want to look at a holistic view of why he wants to keep Egypt white, so to speak, or anti-African, so to speak. Because the knowledge that your ancestors put down is so powerful. It can lift you up, or if you're ignorant, it can bring you back down to a lower state. And your ancestors already told you, the day you don't learn nothing is the day you ain't lived. That knowledge is everything. So let me know what you guys are thinking. What do you feel about the hatred towards Black Egypt? Why does it seem that, all the evidence, all the science, trust the science, then, the narrative that's going around to this day, motherfuckers that didn't even stay awake in science class are trying to belittle you for not trusting the science. But But that's another story for another day. So let me know what you guys are thinking. Comment. Let me know what you guys are thinking about this subject. Subscribe to the channel, like the post, and you all have a blessed day.